Welcome back to the Stuff About Money podcast. I am your host for today, Erik Garcia, certified financial planner, and I am excited to have a friend of mine on the episode today. And we're kind of like I would say we're both we're kind of in the same space, in the money space, and we've had many conversations off there. We've had some on the air on her podcast episode, but I'm excited to have her on for the first time on the Stuff About Money podcast. My friend Carey Wallace. Carey, welcome to the show. How are you?
Erik, thank you. Yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's an honor.
Now, where I spend most of my time on the personal finance side, helping people plan their personal finances and build wealth. That way, you spend the majority of your time on the business finance side. People hire you out to consult them on the business side. Tell us a little bit more about that, so we kind of know that you're bringing some good street cred to this conversation.
Yeah, so I do have a background in finance. I actually have a formal degree in that, if that helps anybody. But I'm the founder and the lead consultant for Agency Focus, where we help value independent insurance agencies in order to use that as a business tool to either acquire other agencies, to grow, to create a perpetuation plan, or to ultimately sell your agency. But I can help you with all of those financial decisions that go into building the future you want for your business.
Fantastic. Now, for those of you listening, you noticed that she said she works with insurance agency owners. There's been a little bit of a series here that I'm doing with podcast guests that work specifically in that niche, insurance agency owners. It's a niche that a lot of my clients are in. So if you're not an insurance person, you're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to listen in. I do encourage you, if you're willing to commit the time, listen in, because we're going to talk about a topic that I think is totally applicable to you. We might use some insurance type language, but I think it's going to be pertinent to you. We're going to be talking about this idea of household CFO, the role that Carey you play in your clients is as a financial as a CFO, or we call fractional CFO. They hire you out to come help them with some of the CFO type stuff. We're going to talk about what exactly that looks like, and then we're going to draw a comparison to the skill sets that we need to have as CFOs of our household, and what does that even look like. But what I want to start off asking you a question that we ask all of our guests. I'm really interested to hear your your answer. But what's one thing about money you know today that you wish you were taught in school?
Yeah, so when I was in school, I was a kid of a mom and a dad that barely scraped it together.
Mm,
Like I didn't get a lot of knowledge about money from my parents. I didn't get any knowledge about money from school, but I was a saver. I was watching that and I did not spend my money at all. But I was a more of a put your money under the mattress kind of saver. So I wish that I knew, had I put that to work, because that was the way that I'm built. Like I really am a very conservative saver, the power of compound interest. I didn't learn that until I was a young adult.
mm.
And had I known that earlier, man, we might not even be sitting here, because I might have
I'm
already figured it out. You know what I mean?
so glad you didn't learn it. My
That's funny.
my life is more full knowing you as in the business sense, but also in the personal sense. You're a great friend. So I'm
Yeah,
so glad
yeah.
that your parents did
Well,
not teach you about money, Eric.
but it's a
Uh,
hard thing. Like you don't know that. If you don't know
yeah,
that, you really lose the power, right? You still can pick it up at any point, but I just
yeah.
think about how different that would have been.
There's no
So,
handbook.
nope.
There's no handbook about how to manage personal finances, and even the those of us who know about money. We might think that we're teaching our kids about money, but if we're not intentional about it, our kids are not getting the lessons that we want them to learn. And I remember my daughter, when she was 16, she stormed into the room once. I don't know, she was like spending too much money on her debit card or something. It's my way of letting her start to learn, kind of like you can't teach a kid to ride if they don't have a bike. You can't
That's
learn how
right.
to spend money if you don't have money. So I don't know the context, but she's like, my dad's a financial advisor and he doesn't even teach me about money. And I'm like, oh God, I was like, I think that was one of those things that was just kind of like she said, just to spite me probably. But um, there's no handbook with money. We're not taught this stuff in school.
Mm-mm.
And the very thing that you just mentioned, compounding interest, if you look at our podcast cover art, there's a formula in there. It's the future value of money. It's one of the things I think is one of the most powerful things in finance is if you understand how money grows exponentially over time. It is one of those things that just kind of changes your mind and how you value a dollar.
Sure.
So
Sure.
thank you for sharing that. Okay, let's hop into a topic. I want to read to you a help wanted ad. Okay. Now
Oh
I'd love
boy.
to get your oh boy. I'd love to get your feedback on it. This is I didn't write this. This is written by I believe it was Sarah Falau. She's the author of The Next Millionaire Next Door. You're probably familiar with the
Oh, sure.
millionaire. Yep. So this is in her book. I think it came out in 2017. And it's a help wanted ad. All right. And they're looking to hire a household CFO. All right. It's a little bit long. So lean in. That's not too long, but lean in. Okay. The household CFO will oversee the household's budgeting and financial planning. They will be required to create, manage, explain, defend, and negotiate household budgets annually and monitor spending and saving related to said budget. They will be required to plan for the financial security and longevity of the family, focusing specifically on retirement planning, college savings planning, and other large expenses in the foreseeable future. The household CFO will be required to balance checkbooks, file tax returns, pay bills on time, create financial plans, create estate plans, research investments, monitor investments, and generally run all financial matters for the household. The household CFO will serve as a check on household spending and thus will work closely with the following individuals: the household chief procurement officer and their team members, read spouse, self, or children. The household CFO may choose to outsource any number of their responsibilities to trusted advisors, and therefore, part of the household CFO's job may include the ability to research and hire quality professionals who act in the household CFO's best interest.
Wow.
Now, it's a lot, right?
Yeah.
Wow. That role, every household should have someone filling that role. Now, I can see your face. People listening can't see Carey's face. You got to hop on the YouTube to see her face. But like, how many households, if you think about your clients, and the majority of your clients are, I mean, no, if not all of them, own insurance agencies. How many of your clients would you say have hired a household CFO or are acting as their household CFO completely?
You know, I work for some incredible people and with some incredible people, but they've hired me because money isn't their forte. And
Mhm.
money isn't the thing that they feel that they have a lot of depth and scope of knowledge. So my guess is many of them, because on the business side, they're seeking out guidance, aren't super stellar on the personal side. And I don't know the answer to whether or not they're seeking out guidance there either. But if you're not a geek like me that loves numbers, it's actually pretty intimidating to do this role. That's not like the fun, sexy job at home. I'll tell you that's for sure. It's the one that's hard, and it's the one that's actually kind of viewed as the wet blanket sometimes, right?
Yeah. Well, tell me if you find this to be true. In business, oftentimes as business owners, we successful business owners have a handle on their finances.
Sure.
They work closely with their CPA. They have a bookkeeper. They do bookkeeping in house. They hire someone like you to help make
Sure.
bigger decisions or to provide some outside, consult on some bigger financial topics. And for some reason, I feel like as business owners, it's easier to have our finances in order on the business side. But then when we get to the personal side, when money leaves our business account and gets paid to us in our personal accounts, doesn't matter how good we are on the business side, there's something seems to happen on the personal side. And in working with a lot of business owners and individuals on their personal finance, I think one of the changes is, as business owners, it's a lot easier for us to be less emotional about some of the business decisions we make.
Uh-huh.
But yet once that money enters our personal bank accounts, all of a sudden we become more emotional. There's several reasons why, but I think that becomes part of the problem is that we're not good on the personal side checking our emotions at the door before we make financial decisions. But on the business side, it's a little bit easier. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot wrapped up into your own personal finances. I think in some ways it's hard to get out of the here and now. I think there's also a lot of pressure with the keep up with the Joneses that gets
Mm,
people in a really bad situation. And, as a parent, because, typically we're talking about a family, it's difficult to not want to give the next generation more or better than what you've had. So the emotions are different. I've seen people in their own businesses have struggle with emotions as well because it's part of who they are. But
mm.
at home, it is all of who you are. Like it is, those decisions are the life you're building and the future you're building with your family. So it's easy to understand why emotions are a big part of that.
Yeah. So one of the roles, now kind of help put some edges on this for me, that you play as, you don't just do CFO work. I mean, there's some
No,
consultant, but here's the reality: is money on the personal side touches everything you do. Every decision you make involves a dollar some way, somehow. Okay.
sure.
So even if it's
Absolutely.
not specifically dollar money related, the decision you make is impacting dollars. Where your kid goes to school, where you shop for groceries, where you go to vacation, the type of clothes you wear, the type of car you drive. I mean, money's
Mhm.
impacting that. Um,
Sure.
it's the same thing on the business side. Can I hire somebody? What's our spending budget for technology, whatever it might be. So I would imagine that some aspect of the role that you play is some planning function, right? Helping business owners. Where are we going? What's our vision? Not even
Sure.
mission, but like, what's our vision? Is that talk about how that
Oh,
plays into the role that you play as CFO?
actually, that's the core of what I do. Because
Mm,
if I don't understand where an agency or a business is trying to go, it's very, very difficult to help put the opportunity cost of a decision in front of a business owner to help them ensure that they're making an informed decision. So, for instance, if I have no idea what the point on the horizon is that you're trying to get to or the timeline, it's really difficult for me to weigh the options and translate it in a financial way for you to make an informed business decision. That's what I do. I sure we look at financial statements and I do budget to actual and I might actually help with debt and all those things. That's kind of like reconciling the bank account and all those that sure, that's the mechanics of it. But what I truly play a role is understand your plan and translate it into financial decisions that you can literally weigh the pros and cons of and connect the dots on how that's getting you closer or further away from what you've set as your goal. And I think it's the same personally, right? Like that's
yeah.
the hard part because in your home, if no one's doing that, they feel like very disconnected decisions where they're truly very connected. And you could find yourself having no retirement because you drove the cars that you thought you needed to, or you lived in a house that was beyond your means, or you did whatever. That's the difference. I think it's easier to trust somebody with your business to show you those decisions than open up your financial at home and have anybody start questioning those decisions for you.
Yeah, that's interesting. You said a couple things there. Let me see if I can kind of remember them all because we're getting up in age, Carey. our,
We
our
are. It's
our
terrible.
memories fail us. What we make up in remembering stuff, what we lose in remembering stuff, we make up in wisdom. I hope
Amen.
and
Amen.
experience. Um, is number number one. I love how you just said that. How the core. I wrote that down. The core of what you do is helping kind of maybe not cast vision per se, but helping maybe them clarify their
Yeah.
vision. I used to do a lot of business planning with clients. This was a long time ago. And one of the beautiful things about being a small business owner, right? We have a lot of freedom. And by small, I mean like there's no one above us telling what to do. We get to control the strings. We get to write our own scripts to some degree. Okay.
Hmm.
Is we create these businesses to help us support our kind of what we do on the personal side, right? And we create a business vision. But what happens sometimes is, in an effort to support what we do on the personal side, the business takes a life of its own, and the business vision almost becomes priority because we never took time to create a personal vision. What I would tell people is, before you create a business vision, is one of the reasons you're starting a business is because you want the freedom and the flexibility to live the life that you want. What does that vision look like? Get some clarity on that vision. Once you have a personal vision and you know what you want your life to look like, then go design your business to support your personal vision. The problem is it gets reversed somewhere along the way. If you're not clear on what you're trying to do, what your purpose is on the personal side, it's easy for the business vision to take over.
Heck
So
yeah.
so to have a clear vision of where you're trying to go in your personal household is so important when you start making decisions about, where do I move to? I had a conversation with someone this morning, and one of the things that they were saying was, we were looking at buying another house, but when we put that in, when we thought about where we wanted to be from a retirement standpoint, we realized that that wasn't the right house. It was too much money. We didn't want to spend it. So we didn't make that decision. That's a really good example of knowing where you're going to be 10, 15 years ago and how a decision today can impact that. So part of the role, I would say the most important role of household CFO is making sure that financial decisions in the house are aligned with vision. So if we kind of walk that back, one of the first roles is to make sure that the household has a vision. We call that a statement of financial purpose. Is
Yep.
we want our clients to have a statement of financial purpose, and they might have a couple different ones in a couple different contexts. But like, where do you want to be? I can't give you any advice if I don't know where we're trying to, if we don't know where we're trying to go, because it's personal finance. It's personal. It's different for you than it is for someone. There's probably more commonality in business goals and business objectives and how you build a successful business and execute it. But on the personal side, there's less rules to some degree.
Sure. Sure. Well, in your job description, I actually wrote a couple things down that because that's what I was thinking. In this home CFO or whatever you called it, household CFO, some of the things were to literally define, explain, negotiate, and defend the financial goals of the household. And if you think about that, that's really what I'm doing as a CFO in a business. I am helping you define them, and
Hmm.
then I'm translating the decisions into those. So I'm explaining it, saying, hey, listen, these are not separate things. These are either steps in the right path or steps that are going to take you off. And we're going to have to redefine where that forecast is and negotiate and defend. That's, I think, where it gets really hard in the household because there's competing priorities
Mm.
more likely at home on what we're negotiating and what we're defending if you're not clear on where you're going,
So
right?
competing, like, give me, what are you thinking there?
So I'm thinking of decisions like I'll use my own personal situation. Like my husband and I were married and I chose to stay home with the kids. Well,
Hmm.
that took us off our goal. I mean, clearly that might have taken us off our goal. In fact, I did a 12-year break. So that's a significant change in the financial trajectory. You got to redefine that. But my goal was, okay, it's no longer finances are most important or career is most important. Our kids actually have to be most important. And that's a new thing that came into this picture. So we had to redefine it. You have competing priorities that come up in time. It could be a sick parent. It could be um, you have a child that has incredible talent and you want them to pursue that talent. And you never ever foresaw that you were going to be traveling the world to have them follow their their sport or whatever that is. Like you can't foresee everything. You got to be able to renegotiate that, right?
Mm. Yeah. So maybe part of the role is you don't know what's around the corner, whether your business or your personal finances. So being prepared for something that the only thing that's really certain is uncertainty. So how
That's
do you
right.
prepare for uncertainty? And it takes time to sit down and say, okay, what does that look like? How do I plan for that? And I think that's one of the roles that this is something I see often that people are gifted. I mean, they're skilled to be able to do this role,
Sure. Sure.
but they don't set time aside to do it. Um,
And it's a hard conversation to have as well. Like sometimes I want the I want the reward today without even contemplating what that's doing to the future. And sometimes if you do that enough times, you're really impacting your future for things that really weren't all that important when you look back on it. So it's also hard to challenge yourself,
yeah.
and yeah,
Well, and this kind of goes to what you're saying. Who plays that role? So, you got a situation, you got a couple, right? There's kids in the house. Who plays that role? By default, historically, it's the husband, right? But is that always the best one? That I'm just talking about historic
yeah,
gender roles. Like, think about it. It's just default. Well, who's going to be the one who manages actually, there no decisions aren't made. It's just it's no one's doing it, so someone steps in.
that's right.
Historically, it's someone just steps in, and then all of a sudden, the person who steps in typically is making decisions. Maybe I mean, and they're gonna maybe there's some good intentions, but if
Sure.
I'm making the financial decisions, I'm making them from my needs, what I think.
Your perspective, and
Yeah.
your perspective could be different. And here, we're leaving out a really big part of households. 50% of households end in divorce, which means people's priorities were divergent at some point.
Hmm.
Money might be in the top five of things that can break people apart
Hmm.
because I mean, you just said money touches everything. So it's
Yeah.
easy to understand how you can get off track on this if you are not communicating well. And or one perspective is dominating and not considering the overall household or all the people inside the household what their priorities are. My priority might be I want to live at the beach, and my husband's priority might be I want to live in some shacks and just fish every day. Those are very different endings. You know what I mean? Like that's a different situation. And if we don't get aligned on that, we got some problems. By the way, we live at the beach. So there's that.
Would he rather live in a shack fishing? Is that kind of
I don't
so
think
you
that's
won?
true. He just wants to fish. So we compromised. Yeah. So
Yeah. Um, no, that's a really good that's a really good point. And well, I'll often you've I think you may have actually we've talked about this. I've done a lot of collaboration with a couples counselor, and Dr. Matt
sure.
will
Yep.
often say that money might not be the reason for marital or relational conflict, but it's certainly fuel to the fire.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
So if we play out this scenario, if we haven't assigned anyone the role of household CFO, and I'm like, someone needs to do it because we're just spending too much money, then all of a sudden I'm the household CFO, and I go to my wife and say, you're spending too much money on Amazon. How's that
Hmm.
going to end?
Yeah, that's not going to end well. It's
No,
definitely not going to end well. No.
I can go to my business partner on the insurance side and say, or on the financial side, and say, hey, Gio, we're spending too much money on, I don't know, eating out, eat out 3 times less a week or whatever. And that's like, okay, that's cool. That's easy. That ends well. But like, no, kids can't go to camp.
Big problem.
That's not
Or
healthy.
they can't go to college. Like there's the things that will start to change, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and if you don't think about it and you don't plan for it and you get 5 years out and realize we can't do this, that's a problem.
Yeah.
But that's the other thing. You've got to have a plan. Going back to that compound interest, if you haven't put away for certain things, we're facing a wedding in our house.
Uh-oh.
Thankfully, I told you I was a saver, so we're good to go. But if you aren't, that's going to look a lot different and make that decision. And then there's people that go heavily into debt because they don't want to say no. And it's not a strong financial decision, but nobody planned. Nobody was that household CFO looking into the future saying, we should probably pay ourselves first before we do all these other things.
Mm, yeah. And to go back to our earlier conversation, is the earlier part of the conversation is no one teaches you how to do this stuff.
Right. That's right. That's right.
And I think that if people just started having the conversation, like, hey, what does it mean to be a household CFO? Like, hey, maybe we need to be a little bit more conscious of our money. That goes a long way. Well, why is money even important to us? So we've talked about kind of this idea of like emotions cause problems in making decisions. You know, there's sometimes um, competing goals, and maybe they're unspoken. It's not even like it's me against you. It's just I don't know why, but um, th- you know, if a third party tells me something, I might listen a little bit different
Oh, for sure.
than if my wife tells me something. I hope she's not listening. No, I
I
listen to
might
my wife.
it'll impact you differently, right? Like it'll just hit differently for someone
Actually,
who's super close to you, right?
I actually joke. My wife hates talking about money. It's just like she doesn't. And I think there's family of origin stuff. Like we just hear you talked about growing up without having money. I think we just learn certain things about money and we create, mechanisms to deal with it. Your way of dealing with not having anything was to be a saver. Um, but my wife does not like talking about money. And I joke as a CFP, I'm a fiduciary, right? And my wife is a client of mine. And my job as a fiduciary is to make decisions that are in the best interest of my clients. And I have to put my my conflicts aside and make
Sure.
decisions. So like that's kind of how I approach making decisions for our household is Jen doesn't like talking about money. So what's the best decision that's going to be for our household, even if it means, something negative for me. I say negative, but you get the idea.
Sure. Absolutely. It's
What
going to
what
go
is it?
against what you think,
Yeah.
but it's going to be right for the group. I get it. Yeah.
What's important to us? Like, what are we trying to build here? Right. What are our values? And are we spending our money in a way that's consistent with our values? Uh,
Sure.
making sure that we're having those conversations. We have a daughter who's looking at going to college in a year. Right. We're having conversations about the cost of college and how to plan for that. That's a role that you need to be planning for big expenses. If you and I have had conversations about hiring staff. Hey, I'm
Sure.
thinking about hiring staff. How do I do that? We talk about the cost of it. It's the same thing that we have to do in our finances. Like that's a big expense. How do we plan for big expense? People in the household need to be doing that. But again, you talk about connecting the dots as all these conversations, right? There's budgeting concerns, there's estate planning concerns, there's investments, there's retirement. It's not all these things are siloed. All these things are integrated, right?
Hmm.
And they should be integrated in a way that's going towards a common goal.
Well, I think, Eric, this is true at home and at work. If no one is consolidating and giving you a line of sight on what decisions you're making and the gravity of some of the decisions you're making, they almost feel disconnected. And here's what you said something earlier about how much you're spending in tech inside your agency. Well, there's often times when I go into an agency and we look at their P&L, their profit and loss statement, and it's all over. It's not connected. They don't have one number to say how much am I spending in marketing, how much am I spending on my people, how much am I spending on tech, and how does that compare or contrast to other agencies that are of like size. Well, think about that at home. Do you ever take all of the Amazon and say annually, this is what we spent on Amazon, or annually, this is what we spent on eating out, and when you realize the volume of that could be a really nice trip, you
Mhm.
might think differently about, I can't afford to go to Italy. Well, actually, you went to Italy 3 times. It was just in the form of Chipotle, like that's really what happened in this world. So I think sometimes having a line of sight on some
Yeah.
of these decisions allows you to, again, explain, negotiate, and defend what's really more important? Eating out 4 times a week, or is it taking a nice trip and learning about different cultures? Like anybody without that line of sight, you can't make that decision. And the CFO, whether in business or household, they have to be able to provide that line of sight.
Well, I would say that's probably the most important thing that someone needs to be putting in the household is tracking and monitoring. Like, where is my
Sure.
money going? One of my
Yeah.
my first pillars of financial security is know where your money's going. Simple as that. It's just spending aware. It's the same
Yeah.
thing with business. If I don't have a good, clean um, profit and loss statement that shows me where's my money coming from and where's my money going, it's really hard to make good decisions. If I don't
Sure.
know where my money's going personally, how am I spending my money? Like, do you know within 10% of what you spend on groceries? Do you know within a certain percentage of what you spend on plug in your other, whatever category? Actually, I don't know what I spend on groceries. Here's a problem. I'm gonna tell you here's a problem for household CFOs to crack. Because if you're tracking your money and you see, I use Monarch to budget. It's great. It's
Sure.
Mint went away. Monarch's great. It's a great way to track. These digital tools are fantastic. So I see Amazon, I see Target, I see Costco, and I look at them like, huh, is that groceries? Is that household items?
Yeah. It's hard to know,
Like
right?
what am I spending my money on? Like, so years and years ago, I decided to simplify my life and said, okay, we need to cut some money. Can we cut Target by 10%? Can we cut Amazon by 10% and just kind of look at it as a bulk? But like it's hard to know where our money's going, but that's like the number one thing that we have to be able to track
Yeah.
our money. That's an important role for a CEO or CFO to play. And here's something that's interesting. If you have identified what's important to you, and then you start becoming spending aware, and you realize like, oh my gosh, I'm spending how much here? That you start to connect the dots on your own,
That's right.
right? You
That's,
start
and it
to,
becomes less emotional. It becomes more about, hey, we're both trying to get to this thing that we agreed is really, really important. It's less about who spent on Amazon and more about, hey, are we getting closer to that goal or
yeah,
further away from the goal? So, and in business, some people want to focus on the spending category. How much should I spend on my people? How much should I spend on this? What you really should be focused on and how much profit do I want in order to get? So literally the bottom
mm,
up, not the ones in the middle. It's the bottom. What am I trying to do? Because that's where you drive the value of your business is that bottom line, not necessarily how much should I spend on my people? And if the bottom line, if you know what you're growing and what your bottom line is, the middle takes care of itself, kind of the same way you're just talking about. But if you focus on the ones in between, you can get way out of whack on the things that are really most important. So
yeah.
it's really
So
interesting, but you have to have someone that can translate that for you. That's not everybody's forte.
translate and maintain accountability to that plan, to that vision. Um,
Yeah,
but that's something I think that's important as well when you start looking at expense categories on either the business or the personal. It's what's important to you. Like I know some business owners that value their staff, their people more than others.
sure. Of
And as
course.
a result, their cost per employee is going to be higher. And
Sure.
if we start benchmarking cost of employees for someone who values their people to cost of employees to someone who doesn't value their employees, then you're out of whack. Like what's going on here? And
Hmm.
I think it's the same thing on the personal side is if I'm looking at like what my neighbor's driving or where my neighbor is going on vacation and trying to benchmark myself against them, like I don't know the rest of the story. I don't know how much debt they have. I don't know how much income they make. I don't know if they're inheriting millions of dollars from hell, I don't know if they're a trust fund baby and they've got
Right.
money coming. I don't know if their parents have given them a credit card and given them like adult people with parents who give them credit cards to spend money that I don't have that privilege. Like, so it's really hard to when we start benchmarking, or I would say in the personal side, comparing ourselves, it becomes very difficult. And I think a good successful household CFO says, hey, you know what? I don't care what my neighbor's doing. I don't care what all my friends are doing on Facebook. What I know is that we want to retire at 55, or we want to scale back dramatically at 55. Or we want to have a house on the beach and a shack on the lake,
That's right. That's
because
right.
that's important to
But
both of us.
I think that's going to become harder and harder and harder in the society we live in, because there's so many opportunities to fall into the trap of comparing. And I think it takes a lot of discipline and a lot of being on the same page to not fall into that trap. Luckily, you know, for us, it was easier because I think we figured that out early on, and got on the same page about money very, very early. When you don't have a lot of money, it's easy to get on the same page. It's
Mm,
when you end up having some opportunity with money that you might go astray. But luckily, we stayed aligned in that, you know, in our marriage, which was fantastic. I know that's super difficult for a lot of people, but, you know, I think
uh,
if there's a lot of people that don't talk about money, like your wife, don't want to talk about money, and there's no way to be on the same page. If you, I'm not saying you're not, but if both people have an aversion of talking about money, then how in the world do you ever get on the same
that's right.
page?
So, well, someone needs to play those roles, and
Yeah, that's what I
I play
mean.
those roles. But if one of us didn't, we would. I mean, yeah, that's where people get in. That's where people find themselves buried in debt, or they find themselves losing stuff.
Right.
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 You brought something up interesting that made me think of something. My wife and I, we got married young. We were both 21 when we got married, and we kind of developed our adult habits together. Right. When I
Yeah.
say adult habits, I mean like living, buying property, working, our work lives started at the same time. So
Yeah.
we didn't have these two disparate adult lives that we had to blend together. So that was kind of cool that we kind of built some of our habits um uh together, and our finances were always together. Well, she actually likes to joke that our first year of marriage, she funded most of it through a grant that she got while she was getting her master's degree. So that's and our personal bank account was her bank account when we first got
That's
married.
funny.
So that's kind of a fun joke between us. See, we talk about money,
Yeah. I'm liking your wife more and more. This is amazing.
but when in a business,
Yeah.
let's say me and you are starting a business together. Let's say you're bringing 100,000 to the table and I'm bringing $100,000 to the table. And I say, okay, Carey, what's your vision for the business? This is my vision of the business. You take your 100,000, I'm going to take my 100,000, and I'm going to build out a plan, a program for my vision. You build out a plan for your vision. That wouldn't work.
Nope.
If you were consulting us, you'd be like, dude, that's crazy. You have to put your money together and
Right.
pull together. But one of the challenges in households is sometimes, and I'm not against his and her money. I'm not against separate bank accounts. What I'm against is when there's no transparency between the two.
Well, separate
And
planning, like separate planning means separate lives. Like that's super difficult. I don't even know how to wrap my head around that, because again, we had almost nothing. So putting nothing and nothing together was a no brainer. But, you know, when people get married in their 30s or 40s or whatever, and they bring assets, that becomes more difficult. I agree with you. If there's no transparency, how do you plan together? How do you do those big things? Or and I'm sure there's plenty of people that make it work. I just feel like it's complicated. And life's already complicated. I
uh,
like
maybe
easy, you know?
complicated, but I would even say more importantly, it's going to be harder to get to your destination, right?
Right.
If we're like Olympic rowers, and I'm rowing at a different pace than you, or hell, I'm rowing backwards and you're rowing forward, it's just going to be a lot harder for us to get to where we want to go.
Or if we're both on the left side the whole time. I mean, we're
Yeah, we're
going
just
in
like doing
circles, my friend.
circles, right? And I get nauseous, and so I think a household CFO has to be a good
Ag-
communicator to be able to align maybe
Agreed.
interests in. I often tell people I'm a big fan of, if you can't get on the same page from a spending standpoint, budget budget each other like a spending account. I told a client this morning, they're single, but from a budgeting standpoint, they're young and they're grinding it out. And I am giving them some really aggressive goals right now. I said, look, you will be happy if you do this right now. You're going to grind it out, and then by the end of the year, we're going to plan kind of a fun account. You're going to drop $1,000 in there and you can do whatever you want with it. No shame. Okay. But you're going to meet these goals first. I think that there's some value to that in a household to say, hey, look, we're going to budget some spending money, your money, my money, the kids' money, and we can each make our own decisions without any judgment, right? If you want
Yeah.
to, buy whatever you want to buy, that's cool. I want to buy whatever I want to buy, that's cool. You know, if I want to spend my money on more plants for my garden, let me buy more plants for my garden. If you want to spend your money on,
Please bring the plants on. You got to do
yeah,
the plants. Yeah, I
yeah.
get it.
But someone has to play that role, and I think it needs to be intentional.
Right.
Um,
But
and I think,
that's different than separate accounts that have different goals that are moving at different paces. That's a piece that has some uh, wiggle room or some anonymity to make you be able to do things that, listen, we used to check if it was more than $50, we checked with each other before we spent anything. That's the true, you
yeah,
have nothing,
yeah,
right? That is not the case in our marriage. There's definitely some wiggle room in what you're doing, but we also know that the end goal is there and we're not going to make major purchases without each other. Right.
yeah.
So
We had that rule. We had the 100 and I think $150 rule. But it gets to a point. I think it gets to a point where I mean, you get to a point where you've done something from long enough that the things that you had to do intentionally become almost first
exactly.
nature, and it becomes a little
Right.
bit. And that's where you want, that's obviously where you want um, to get. So there needs to be someone in the household who is disciplined, kind of keeping tabs on all this stuff. Where's our spending going? And then planning, where do we want it to go? Uh,
Right.
and then if you're dealing with, debt, as a company, you go out, you borrow money. There's really specific things that you want to borrow money for. And there's some specific things that you don't want to borrow money
Right.
for. And you have thoughtful conversations about that as a business with your CFO, with your business partner, if you have a business partner, and you're prudent in how you use debt. And if you have debt, you don't want to hold on to it too long. The same thing on the personal side, right? If you're dealing with debt, someone has to be conscious of it. Someone has to be paying bills. That sounds obvious, but maybe it's not obvious. But like, is there a plan to get out of debt?
Yeah.
Are we going to accelerate that? Are we not going to accelerate that?
Do we have plans that we want to buy other things that would impact whether or not we should have debt or not? Like if you're investing in properties, like someone has to have the long-term vision to know what you need to do today to set yourself up to be able to do what you need to do. There's the only thing that's ringing in my head as we're having this conversation is yes, someone has to be that household CFO. But I would also say it might move and shift over your relationship, who takes the lead. So
Mm-hmm.
for sure, for us, that happened. So early on, I mean, get it. I was the saver, and I also, have a finance degree. So I was naturally the CFO in our family, without question. When I stayed home, I was the CFO. It was easy. Like I had time. I was planning. It's also what I like to do. When I went back to work, it was overwhelming. I'm now a mom and
Yeah.
I'm doing all the planning and I'm redefining my role. My husband took it on. And very quickly, it shifted right back to me. So, you also have to figure out who is best suited to do this role, who enjoys it, who can do it in a way that um, provides that line of sight
Yeah.
without that, conflict that could come with that. So I think you have to be willing to renegotiate that.
We have a really cool assessment that we can do with couples, and it looks at certain areas of kind of, let's say, financial skill sets, right? Who's good? Like, are you good at planning and monitoring? Do you have high confidence? We know that the higher the confidence you have, the easier it is for you to make big financial decisions. Doesn't necessarily mean good financial decisions. Just your I mean, because a lot of people have false confidence, right? Your
Sure.
ability to ignore what's going on around you, right? You really don't care about what your neighbors are doing or what your friends are doing. And then what we're able to do is take those two assessments and a couple and overlay them. And there were a couple situations that really quickly, before I was even really acquainted with a couple, I knew right off the bat some of the recommendations that I was going to make. It's like, why are you running the household finances? And I wasn't that direct to the question, But essentially, like this person was required was doing the husband was doing the household finances, but he was terrible at planning and monitoring. That was not his skill set. She was really high in planning and monitoring. He had a lot of confidence and made all the decisions. She had very low confidence and made very few decisions in the household. We changed a couple things around, met with him a couple months later. Um, and basically my advice was, hey, do you mind if she sits in with you when you're paying bills and you're making financial decisions? He's like, no, no, absolutely, 100%. It wasn't like I'm going to do this and you're not.
Right.
It's just they defaulted into these roles. Man, they came back and her confidence level like tripled. She was making good financial decisions, all because she felt like she was more plugged into what was going on in the household
Sure.
finances, and he was relieved from it. So it's
Yeah, he
really,
probably didn't want to be doing it either. Like we all do things that we think we're supposed to do, not necessarily what we're wired to do, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
funny.
One of the things in the description that it talks about is um, that if you're not gonna do these roles, it's really important that you find somebody to do these roles, right? In my business, if I don't want to do bookkeeping, I can't just not do bookkeeping.
That's right.
I've got to find someone who's competent to do bookkeeping.
That's right.
In my business, if I don't like paying bills, I've got to
You got to
find
still pay
somebody
him.
to pay
Right.
bills because otherwise we have a problem. And it's the same thing in the household. If you don't like to pick investments, or if you feel like you're too busy to pick investments, if you don't like, you know, if you don't know what you need to do in an estate plan, you got to go find someone who's going to help you make those decisions and walk alongside of you.
No doubt. I mean, inaction is actually worse in this situation, right? So I would agree with you, and you got to pick someone that matches and fits with you. It can't just be anyone. It needs to be someone that understands what your wants to understand what your goals are, because it's a big thing to relinquish, but finding the right person to trust is incredibly important. And I would also say, um, certainly in business, it can actually inhibit you from getting where you're going because you can only take it so far. Same
Mm,
thing at home. Like there's a lot of people, had they sought out help earlier, they would have far more options in both business and home.
mm,
So
yeah.
seeking that out early, getting those skill set, if you don't have it, seeking it out early gives you so much more power and so much more opportunity.
I can tell you when I work with clients, one of the maybe the more difficult topics to convey value in, because when people hire a financial advisor, typically they're thinking retirement planning. They're typically thinking, I need someone to help me buy my investments. And I mean, that's the majority. What we do a ton of that. But like, if you were to ask me, what's the most valuable thing that we do for clients? It's not that. I mean, that's important, but it's not that. It's helping clients make big decisions and
Yeah.
small decisions.
Yeah.
And the challenge there is sometimes it's really hard to convey the value that adds um, to a relationship. Um, and those are some of the things that, when you look at some of these higher level consultants or coaches, when you hire them, the reason you hire them is more of number one, I need someone to help me make decisions. Number two, I need someone to help me clarify where I'm going. We work with the business coach, me and Xavier on the financial side. And what I told the coach was, I said, hey, look, the biggest thing I need is I need someone to keep me accountable to these three objectives that I'm telling you are important. The way I will judge whether or not this is a successful relationship is, do you keep me accountable to these things? Now, I'm probably I probably have a little bit more clarity on where I'm going, but
Yeah.
like, I'm going to pay you money just to make sure that I do the things that I know I need to do. And I need you to make sure that I do them.
Yeah. So I think for me in my role, I don't think I take on a client that I can't show the value of what I'm
Mm,
doing,
yeah.
because remember, the core of what I do is to make sure that their
Good.
business has value, right? And so it's not about helping them make decisions, it's about helping them weigh all the options and understand the information to then lead them to make the decision that makes the most sense. Like, you're either going to redefine your goal or you're going to make a decision that's in line with the goal. And I've got to give
Yeah.
you all the information to show you whether it is or isn't. But part of that process
Love
is,
that.
did we increase the value of the business or did we decrease the value of the business?
Yeah.
And without that, I think it's really hard, right? That's
Yeah.
super hard at home.
Yeah.
Well, or maybe is it? Did we increase the value of your portfolio or did we decrease it based on those things? And you changed the goal because we put you on a path that this is what the portfolio could look like, right?
Well, I would say portfolio may not be the best way to do it because the market goes up and the market goes down. And
That's true. That's
sometimes
true.
it's out of our, well, it's generally always out of our control. Um, so that might not be a good metric of success, but maybe net worth is a metric of success, or if we have something to come back to, and this might be a good place to start wrapping up. If we know what our ultimate vision is,
Yep.
what's the succession of decisions that we've made over the past year, over the past 6 months, over the past 3 years, 2 years, 4 years, 5 years, that has gotten us closer to our goal? Are we closer to our goal? And sometimes it's more confidence in making decisions. Sometimes I feel more secure. We're finding ourselves having more, I would say, more fundamental conversations with all our clients. And we're kind of going back, asking really simple questions like, hey, Carey, if you had an emergency that happened today, a financial emergency, how would you pay for it? Do you know where you would pay for it from? Right?
Yeah.
What's the biggest financial emergency you've had in the past 5 years? Do you have money to do it? Like some really
Yeah.
basic
How did you
things
pay for it? And are you
that,
still
that
paying
give
for it? Yeah.
that give some basic financial security stuff. So like that's part of the
Sure.
knowing where you're going and then saying, hey,
Sure.
am I closer there?
Yeah.
And yeah, and again, I want to come back to something that I think is the most important. This is why I hire. One of the reasons I hire professionals. One reason is I don't have the skill set to to write my own contracts, or to do file my own taxes. Um, but one of the reasons I hire other professionals is because there's a return on my investment. If I pay you to come help me make some decisions, that frees me up to do the work that drives revenue.
Sure. Or it puts me on a path that gets me closer to my goal versus if I made the decision without the information and now I didn't realize I
Yeah.
just put myself in a bad situation. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And I
Got to
think
have return on investment.
that's the role that the household CFO has to bring all. And we talked about some of the skill sets and tools and characteristics of a household CFO, but I think more of like, if there's anything that people walk away from here, I hope it's, hey, there's some there's some things that we need to be doing as a household that we may or may not be doing, and we might not even know what they are.
Right.
And we need someone to help us figure out what they are. If you have a business, you need someone like Carey. Um, if you have a personal finance, if you have a household, you need a financial planner. If anything, you need if you have a business. I'm going to go out and say this, and whether you hire me or hire someone else, if you have a business, you at least have to work with the financial planner at least in a one-time relationship. If anything, just to make sure that you have all the boxes checked
Agreed.
and that you're moving in the right direction. Whether you work in an ongoing relationship or not, I think there's some value in that. You know, we work with our clients on an annual basis. We got a couple different models that we work with our clients because finances are constantly changing, and part of it is monitoring and making sure we're on track. So we have a couple business models to support that type of relationship. But man, there's so much that we don't know, and we don't know that we don't know it.
Right.
And
And
I
it
need
could, and
someone.
if you wait, then you have less options. And that's the
It
problem.
gets more expensive.
Time is a problem. It's either your friend or your enemy.
It gets more
And with
expensive.
money, it can be really, really your enemy. So
100%. Carey,
I would agree. Yes.
thank you. I appreciate you. Even
This
in
is fun. We
closing,
could do it forever,
I
We
know,
could
I
we could
know.
do this for a while. Yeah.
We have to do this again. I'm sure we'll come up with a reason to record again. Any parting wisdom or anything that you want to say, like, hey guys, this is, if you in the past, you sat through this for 60 minutes, if you've made it to this point, this
Yeah.
is what you need to walk away with.
So I would just say this. If it's easy for you to seek help in your business, it should be equally easy for you to seek help in your home or your personal life, because that is so much more important and that is who you are. So don't hesitate to seek guidance in something that's so incredibly important to your family. That's what I would say.
Awesome. And like what we like to say over here, plan wisely, live confidently. When you make good decisions and you're planning wisely, you can have more confidence as you live your life. Carey, if people want to reach out to you, we'll put your information in the show notes, but where's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, you could reach me. I have a website. It's www.agency-focus.com. I'm the first face you see, or you can reach me in LinkedIn. I'm all over the place, actually.
Yeah, you are. There's a good chance that she'll be in a city near you within the next 365 days.
That's probably true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Erik. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, Carey.